Here are some of the things that left-handed pitcher Rube Waddell did during his 1903 baseball season. He lived in a firehouse, he worked as a bartender in West Virginia, toured America in a hit play, despite the fact that he couldn't memorize any of his lines, saved a person from drowning, he met, married, and divorced a woman, he nearly blew a friend's hand off in a shooting accident, and he was bitten by a lion after punching it in the face. He also led baseball with 302 strikeouts and won 22 games, and that was just in 1 year of his life. Rube Waddell is easily regarded as the craziest man in the history of baseball, and that's saying something. He was one of the most gifted pitchers of all time, but his life was marred by substance abuse, erratic behavior, and terrible relationships with women. In fact, he once claimed he'd forgotten how many women he'd actually married. Waddell was famous for feuding with teammates, disappearing for weeks or months at a time, and sometimes even leaving in the middle of games for no apparent reason. But it turns out there's a reason Rube Waddell was the way he was, one that's only come to light very recently. So let's get into it. George Edward Rube Waddell was the left-handed pitcher in Major League Baseball who played for 13 years. He was part of teams like the Louisville Colonels, Pittsburgh Pirates, and Chicago Orphans in the National League, as well as the Philadelphia Athletics and St. Louis Browns in the American League. Known for his strange behavior and ability to strike out batters, he led the league strikeouts for 6 years straight. He had great control over his pitches and was famous for his fastball, curveball, and screwball. Waddell was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1946, but sadly he's most remembered for the crazy life that he led on the field. Waddell had an unusual childhood and was a very different kind of person. He wandered away from home at the age of 3 and didn't go to school often. He worked out his arm by throwing rocks at birds and took tough jobs like mining and drilling as a kid, which helped him build his strength. The children do yearn for the mines. From his earliest baseball days, he was always unpredictable. Early on, he left a game in the middle of play to go fishing. He was also obsessed with fire trucks and would often run off the field during games to chase them if one happened to come by. During off seasons, Waddell would sometimes disappear for long stretches. On one occasion, his whereabouts were unknown for months, until someone found him wrestling alligators in a circus. He was easily distracted by puppies. In fact, fans of opposing teams would often bring them to games and hold them up, so Waddell would run over to play with them. He would also be distracted on the mound by shiny objects. It's not a joke. Off the field, Waddell struggled with alcoholism, and he reportedly spent his entire first signing bonus on a drinking spree. The Sporting News jokingly called him a southpaw, a play on the term southpaw, which means a left-handed pitcher. His strange behavior often caused fights with his managers and teammates as well. Waddell's first professional contract was for $500 with Louisville, where he pitched a couple of league and exhibition games in 1897. After the season, he was loaned to the Detroit Tigers to gain experience. But after he didn't pay his rent, he left Detroit and went to pitch in the Great White North of Canada, eh? He could have stayed with the Tigers, but he refused to pay a small fine the team had charged him from playing with a quote-unquote scrub baseball team without permission. Instead, he joined a small independent team in Canada, which apparently only paid him $60 a month, which is worth around $1,000 today. But it wasn't an official minor league team, so he could moonlight with other teams as he wished to help pay bills. But whatever Waddell's faults and oddities, everyone recognized that he was a unique talent, and that would keep him in the big leagues despite his increasingly erratic behavior and brawls with teammates. Waddell eventually returned to his hometown, Homestead, Pennsylvania, to play semi-pro baseball. Even though Louisville kept his rights, they lent him to Columbus in 1899, where he finished with an impressive 26-8 record. He rejoined Louisville for the last month of the 1899 season and won 7 out of 9 games. That's crazy to me because that's 100 years before I was born. Exactly. The man had big league skills talent, okay, up to a point where he would sometimes wave his teammates off the field, leaving no defenders behind him, and then he'd just casually strike out the batter. He'd typically only do this in exhibition games, however, since there's a rule that prohibits teams from playing with less than 9 players on the field, but I mean, come on. That's pretty ballsy even in an exhibition match, okay? During a league game in Detroit, he also called all of the outfielders to come in close, sit down on the grass around the mound, and relax while he just struck out the opposing side. which again is absolutely mad, but I think in a good way. Okay, if only we could have that kind of confidence at our jobs. Which could also explain to me why he'd so often get distracted. Okay, like when you're good at something, you tend to relax about it. Of course, there were other reasons why Waddell was the way he was, reasons no one at the time properly understood, and that ultimately ruined his career and life, unfortunately. And before games, he would often pour ice water on his arm, since as he put it, if he didn't cool off his arm, he'd burn a hole in the catcher's mitt. And yes, this is something that he would do before games, not after them. I didn't misspeak, it's before. And he didn't like listening to the catcher, to a point where the catcher would refuse to catch his pitches unless they were actually what he called, which Waddell eventually actually caught on to. And if you think that that's a lot, this man is an enigma in his entirety, okay? He was born on Friday the 13th and died on April Fool's Day. That's not a joke. Fate itself knew that Waddell was going to be a character. On his first day playing for Louisville, Waddell rolled to town at 2 a.m. and decided to introduce himself to the manager by knocking on his door at 2 a.m. After promptly being told to go F himself, Waddell proceeded to introduce himself in the same manner to every member of his team. Yeah, waking up all of your teammates, their wives, kids, pets at 3 in the morning is not a great way to win friends in the locker room. And not only did Waddell try to introduce himself to every member of his team, he then went back to the manager's house to warn him to check up on William Hoy, a teammate who didn't answer his door, okay, because Waddell was worried about him. He was just a good guy. However, Hoy didn't answer his door because he was deaf and mute. And remember when I said that Waddell would chase fire trucks? Well, that's not exactly the whole story. Turns out that he didn't just chase them because he liked them, he actually wanted to help fight the fires, to a point where Waddell actually went to the fire department and got a job, while also playing professional baseball at the same time. He often wore a red shirt under his baseball uniform while he was pitching, just in case he had to leave to go fight fires in the middle of a game. I mean, I guess he did have a sense of the greater good, but I'm the greatest good you're ever gonna get. Since one baseball game can wait if lives are in danger, I can respect that, but I'm sure his manager didn't share this ideal. His teammates would have to keep an eye on him in order to make sure he didn't decide to go running off the field in the middle of an at-bat to actually put out a fire. But do you want to know the best part about this whole spiel about fighting fires? In one of the games that he played, a mattress that was being used as a stopper behind home plate, most likely due to a cigarette or a lighter, ended up catching on fire during a game. Yeah, talk about irony. I wonder if that happened on a Friday the 13th too. I wonder if that happened on his birthday. Because like that just sounds like a birthday gift. Waddell dragged it out onto the field so that it could burn safely, saving the game and maybe even some lives. But yeah, him doing that came in handy. Crazy. The dude really wanted to be a hero and help as many people as he could, okay? I mean, at one point, he jumped off a ferry into a river to save a woman from drowning. Yeah, he jumped off the ferry, swam through what I'm sure was freezing cold water, risking hypothermia and near instant death to save a woman that he didn't know. But it turned out to just be a log that was floating alongside them. But hey, mistake or not, you gotta admire that kind of willingness to put others before yourself. Okay, dude was like baseball Batman. I'm here for justice and strikeouts. He was also an animal lover. Okay, dogs, pigs, and even bears. Yep, haha, that's right. Waddell kept pet bears. Yes, multiple, plural of bears. One of which he named after Connie Mack, his manager from the Philadelphia A's. And as I mentioned earlier as well, he would often go off to pet dogs that fans were holding in the stands, and it really became a tradition for opposing teams' fans to bring dogs to the park for Waddell. Seriously, opposing fans were so worried about his skill that they basically invented take your dog to the park night just to save their own players from being struck out. But I mean, based on his track record, all of this did feed his love for puppies. And the coach noticed this too, so when facing him, they would talk about dogs and stories of dogs to distract him from the puppies in the stands so that he would have multiple distractions, and one coach even offered to give him a hunting dog, which excited Waddell so much that he lost all focus during the game when he was supposed to be pitching. which is insane because like pitching is the hardest job in baseball and you somehow distracted the man from it. On another occasion, someone put a dog in the third base coach's box to distract Waddell. And of course it worked, okay? And hot diggity dog, that should be illegal. But I guess he also would love those stadium dogs, or hated them. I guess it depends on how you looked at it. His relationship with animals didn't stop there though, okay? Despite loving his pet bears, Waddell climbed into a bear cage at the zoo to wrestle them. Yeah, the precursor to Harambe, R.I.P. He tackled a walrus, not sure how you really do that, wrestled alligators at the circus, as I mentioned, very Steve Irwin, R.I.P., rode ostriches, which is on my bucket list, ended up punching a lion at a theater because he got mad at it, causing it to bite his hand, and then, yeah, here's the craziest one. Yeah, those aren't even the craziest Rube Waddell animal stories, alright? Allegedly, he somehow adopted a flock of geese and trained them to jump rope. What the hell? Now, look, I can't verify the truth of this, but people reported on it. Supposedly, one of these geese actually refused to jump, so he taught it to hold the rope instead, so that he could spin the other side. I can maybe sort of believe that they were trained to jump rope, okay? But what I don't believe is that Waddell adopted a flock of geese. Have you ever met a Canada goose? Okay, they're not nice. They bite, they leave green poo everywhere, okay? And not even Rube Waddell could have the patience to adopt them. Trust me, okay? I live in Canada. Our geese, we call them danger chickens. For a reason. In the intro, I mentioned Waddell's crazy 1903 season, during which he not only won 22 games and tallied 302 strikeouts, but also toured America in a hit play called The Stain of Guilt. Perhaps, unsurprisingly at this point, Waddell couldn't memorize his lines, but his co-stars learned to work with him as he improvised his way through each performance. Each show was improvised separately. The show also received rave reviews, especially the scene where Waddell picked up the villain of the play and threw him across the stage. But despite his antics, on the mound, Waddell was setting records. He followed up his crazy 1903 by striking out 47 more batters in 1904. He would remain the only pitcher in history with back-to-back 300 strikeout seasons until Sandy Koufax in 1965 and 66. In 1905, Waddell won the pitching triple crown with the most wins, strikeouts, and the lowest ERA in baseball. In 1908, he struck out 16 batters in a single game, setting a record for the time. He still holds the American League for most strikeouts in a season by a lefty, which is 349 from his 1904 season. However, by 1906, Waddell's drinking and personal problems began to undermine his on-field success. Injuries and divorce sent him running for the bottle, and his unusual behavior began to grate on his teammates. He began to bicker with his catcher, enabler, and roommate, sorry if I butcher this, Ossie Schreckengost, who was annoyed that Waddell got away with things that other players didn't. Schreckengost also refused to room with Waddell until a clause was added to Rube's contract, forcing him to eat crackers in bed, which is admittedly petty and hilarious. But there are more serious incidents, okay, like almost certainly alcohol related, that finally turned Waddell's teammates against him. In 1907, he started a brawl on a train because he didn't like a teammate's hat. Despite being the most dominant pitcher in baseball, he was sold to the St. Louis Browns in 1908 for $5,000. In 1909, Waddell was so intoxicated that he actually passed out in the middle of a game. In 1910, he was finally released by St. Louis, and although he floated around the minor leagues for a while, he never played in the majors again. His final decline was a tragic one. In 1912, Waddell was playing a spring training game in Hickman, Kentucky, when the town flooded. True to form, Waddell sprung into action and helped save many of the residents of the town. Unfortunately, though, his drinking had worn down his health and he was no longer the man that he had been 5 years before. During the flood, he contracted pneumonia and never recovered his health. He died in a sanitarium on April Fool's Day 1914 at the age of 37. Waddell's final major league stat line established him as a legend of the sport, and he was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1946. He finished his career with 193 wins, 2,316 strikeouts, and a 2.16 earned run average over 2,961.1 innings pitched. I don't know how you pitch .1 innings, but hey, maybe you baseball nerds can tell me. But what makes all of this more impressive is the real reason behind Waddell's odd behavior. Modern analysis has concluded that the most likely explanation is some form of learning disability. And honestly, as someone with ADD and autism, it makes sense. ADD and ADHD minds aren't task-based minds, okay? We don't get the typical serotonin release from completing a task. From my experience, we just get relief that it's finally done, especially if we've been procrastinating it for a while. And even if it's a job, doing the same thing over and over again, while easy, is extremely boring. So mixing it up by moonlighting with new teams and irregularity probably really influenced his decisions. Tragically, mental health wasn't really understood at all in Waddell's day, so his issues weren't diagnosed, they went untreated, and they were exploited by many others. This likely led him to self-medicating with alcohol, which is actually kind of common with ADHD minds because we have addictive personalities, but it ultimately alienated the people around him. But despite all that, Rube Waddell still made it into the Hall of Fame, and what, maybe there's hope for me. There's a YouTube Hall of Fame one day, maybe I can be in there for, I don't know, some random reason. So there you go, the craziest man in all of baseball, who honestly wasn't that crazy and maybe just a bit neurodivergent. What other athletes do you think have odd histories, and do you believe that he could train geese to jump rope, okay? I don't, but hey, be sure you let me know in the comments below, and be sure you subscribe for more crazy historical stories. Thanks for watching.